Can I say a few words? Good. Well, first of all, I do want to talk about the past 4 years and hope for the next 4 years. The Mayor's Task Force on Active Transportation has been very active and very positive for the community. I look at the report, the City of Charlottetown Environment and Sustainability Report. It talks about the additional paved multi-use pathways, 6 kilometers, and actually I think it's beyond 6 kilometers. And we looked at cost of almost 2.3 million for those 6 kilometers, but there was that doesn't take into account the pathway that runs parallel to the arterial highway from Murchison Lane up to, it'll be Mount Everett Road. That was an additional cost of 3 million. So altogether, we're looking at about 6.5 million on active transportation pathways that have been covered because of the hard work of this task force. Lots of great discussion. I've been here on and off over the last several years, and I'm very committed to continue the task force, but maybe more at an advisory committee level. That task force is more to get some ideas and look at a longer-term plan for the city. So I think it has the opportunity to go to the next level, and that would be an active transportation advisory committee. And I'm promoting that. As you know, there's an election going on, and this whole issue of transportation use by walkers, cyclists, people with disabilities, moms and dads with baby carriages, skateboards, rollerblades. It should be open for all. And we saw the benefits of opening the inside pathway at Victoria Park. Prior to COVID-19, it was solely a cyclist lane. Now that it's an active transportation pathway, more users and happier people that use the boardwalk, but also see the activity that takes place on that inside active transportation pathway at Victoria Park. And you know what, the days of sidewalks, I think that we may have to look at sidewalks being replaced by multi-paved pathways, multi-pedestrian paved pathways, or active transportation pathways, because the future that we're seeing now in front of us doesn't require concrete sidewalks. It requires more a pathway that's asphalt, that can be, as Ryan knows, as a person in a wheelchair, a person with disability, that the smoother the surface, the less friction he has as a participant in the community. So, Ryan, I think that your work right from the start was positive, and I know with the group that's here, I've listened into and participated in the Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, and all pro active. And I want to do a big shout out for Mitch Underhay with the community friendly group that has been very important in community cycling, community friendly, cycle friendly community, which has been very positive for not only the Charlottetown area, but I think branching out to the west in Cornwall and to the east in Stratford. Because if we can create an integrated network amongst the capital region, all the better for all residents in the capital region, not just Charlottetown, Stratford, and Cornwall. So again, I want to personally say on behalf of council, the staff, and the citizens of Charlottetown, thank you for your work. And as I said, I hope that the next stage will be to take this to the higher level of an advisory committee that will report directly to council through our community engagement officer or the committee responsible for it. I believe it's the Standing Committee for Environment Sustainability. So, Orion, thank you. And as I said, or as Doug mentioned earlier, I have to go to another function with the Planners Association. And as for the process, we'll just wait to see how the election turns out and move on from there. So thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for your time. You've been very generous with your time with our committee. You've come to a lot of our meetings, whether it was in person or online, and you've always been positive. I don't think I've met a more positive person in this level of government. You're always positive and saying great things, so I really like that. And I like that you've put a focus on active transportation, because I really think it's super important for everybody. Like you said, everybody from to walkers, to bikers, to people with disabilities, and families and children. I think that's been so important for you to push that. And wish you all the best. I hope that you are successful with your re-election bid. And if you're not, I hope that the next person that comes in takes it as seriously as you have, and helps to make active transportation part of Charlottetown. I think there's some big areas in the city that have been identified, things like University Avenue and Belvedere and North River Road, and some of those places in between, to look at those seriously and to put the proper funding into that. And I think you've kind of helped people recognize that this is important. So thank you so much for your time.
I just wanted to share as well. I'm really glad to hear that we want to move forward and build on what we've started here. And forgive me if I'm overstepping, because I was absent from last month. But last month, so Mitch Underhay did present to the group, and I think the consensus, having read the minutes, is that the good next step for the city is to have a cohesive overall plan in terms of infrastructure. And so through funding provided by the province, the AT Fund, Bike Friendly Communities is developing exactly such a plan for Charlottetown, Cornwall, Stratford, and shared it with this group, I believe, the draft plan last month. And so I just wondered, if you haven't seen it, if I could give you a copy, if that would be...
Love to get a
for
copy.
your information.
And I'll get it right after.
Okay.
And again, bike-friendly community it has been a very strong part of this promotion of active transportation pathways. And I did the ride around with Mitch, and I know his commitment. I actually saw him this afternoon with some cyclists going through the city. So he never stops cycling. So yes, I believe that the bigger picture is the cap it includes Stratford, Cornwall, and Charlottetown. We have to make that happen. And you know yourself, you can look at the active transportation pathway that goes from the front door of Town Hall in Cornwall into Charlottetown. We have to complete it now from the Queen's Arms intersection to Spencer Drive, then onto the trail. And then we also have the Hillsborough Bridge active transportation pathway that is connecting on to now our arterial highway active transportation pathway. So all those connections are happening, but now let's connect the dots. And I think it goes back to Josh Underhay's dream that we're a bike-friendly community, and we want to grow on that theme and celebrate that. It's not just Philip Brown or the council that's doing the work. It's all about the people, and you are the people that make this happen. You know, the politicians are elected; they're there to do their work for the constituency, but you're here for the whole community and the adjacent communities. So I really appreciate it.
Well, if I could speak a little bit as well, I'd be grateful. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the leadership you've shown on this. I think it really has made a noticeable difference over the last 4 years. I mean, the city looks different as a result of this, and I think that's only very, very good news. So I thank you very much for your leadership on this. And I'm very interested to hear that you're thinking to be re-elected, of moving this committee up to an advisory level. I think that's important. I think there is a lot of goodwill here, but also in other community groups for working towards building an integrated network across the city. And I think this will serve the city very well as we move into the next 50, 75 years. I think it's what cities should be doing. So thank you very much for your leadership on that.
I have to get going. I won't interrupt your meeting anymore, Margaret and Sharon. And so thank you again. Have a great evening. And don't forget, get out to vote. As we say, vote early, vote often.
Can I ask for, just for my own sake, for not being here last time, is this basically about Mitch's presentation, more or less, on the network plan? Okay. I did read the minutes, so I did kind of catch up on what you would have covered, but I'll ask questions if I have. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I thought that part of the agenda was to follow up with Mayor Brown, mostly. And then I think that's what we had discussed, which has happened. Does anybody have any questions, though?
I asked Mitch if he wanted me to share anything or ask you anything as a follow-up. So let me see what he told me. I wrote it down. It was mostly that. Oh, yes. Okay. Please clarify for me if you already talked about him with this, but he thought that if this group is in favor of moving for or supporting this plan, it's still in draft form, but with, whatever tweaks end up, he thought it would be helpful because this plan is not, even though it was the provincial government provided the funding, it's the cities and towns that need to adopt it officially. So he thought it would be helpful for this group to possibly provide either a letter or some sort of endorsement or a motion. I'm not sure what that would look like, what would be best to kind of indicate our support for it, even though it's currently in draft form, if that's something the group is comfortable with. I know I'm kind of not an unbiased figure in this case. But that was something he asked if I would ask, if there was something, especially before the group sort of is dissolved for the election, if there is a way that we can voice that support. And he's going to try to kind of collect similar endorsements from different groups.
I think that would be a great idea. If necessary, I'd be prepared to draft a letter and send it around, and everybody could append a signature, or we could sign it as the have Ryan sign it as the chair of the committee. Either would work, but I'd be prepared to write a letter of endorsement.
I like portions of it. I don't like all of it because anything that's drafted, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's this or something else, there's always people that are going to have differing opinions. And the plan itself, I can support parts of it, but there's definitely things about it that I do not like. Some of the areas that want to be focused on, I wouldn't focus on. And I've even talked to people outside of this because I said, after our last meeting, I said, bike-friendly communities had this idea, and just mentioning some of the parts about it. And some people said, no, I wouldn't focus on that area of town. Like, different people have different ideas of where they think these types of things should be. And, that's up to the government or to hold some surveys and things like that. But overall, I think there's been a huge amount of thought put into it, and I think it's sincere. It needs to be fleshed out more. But overall, I think it's really good.
If that's an issue, if I was to write the letter, I could say I could be more general and say that the AT committee is in favor of an integrated network, citywide network plan, something like that for active transportation, not necessarily sort of endorsing this plan in all of its specifics, but endorsing the idea underlying this plan. And obviously, as I think Mitch said, all of the sort of specifics in the plan would be subject to politics, subject to money, subject to timing, and different strategic priorities as the environment changes. So were the committee to want to support this plan, I could write the letter in a general way or a specific way, depending upon what the will of the committee is.
For essence of time, sorry, Ryan, in the group's time together, I am in support of moving it forward, and I'm wondering, Jason, if we could identify perhaps the areas of concern that you do have, and put those directly in the letter, where it is speaking that, you know, I'm not sure if we look at it this way, at a 10, what would you give it? Kind of, Jason? And perhaps go forward with this little stronger approach in our support, and then identify or highlight some specific, if there's top 3 or 4 things where it's not, where you don't really agree with it, you know, we could state that, or would ask for it to be a different review or approach on it.
I don't mind that. I think that's a good idea. It's not so much what I thought was bad. It's more about, well, it's not so much left out. It's when I'm talking to people, because I always talk to people all the time, and I say, you know, the city's doing all these things, and we've got these really great transportation trails, and some people don't even realize we have some of the stuff that we have. But there's 3 things that come up outside of the Towers Road. Towers Road, I mean, we've talked about this to nauseam, right? That's identified. But as far as people, where's the most terror? Like, that's what it really comes down to. Where are people scared to bike, and where do they need to be when you're talking about transportation on cycles? And the biggest one that I hear usually is North River Road. That's the one that comes up the most. Seconded by University Avenue. I think University Avenue might be number 1, but people are so scared to go down University Avenue that they don't even bring it on their list, because the walking path that's on the other side of the road is so close to the road that it's almost scary. So I know that they have identified with the city, and they did talk about funding an ATC path straight from University all the way down to Euston Street. And when people found out about that, they were super excited about it. So that, and then going across Belvedere Avenue from North River Road up to Mount Edward, those are the major 3 things, and those are things that will take, you know, it's a lot of funding, and it's a lot of money. My biggest thing in any of this, I know in some of the plan, like some of the things, I don't want to say dislike about the plan, because there was a lot that I liked about it, but it was little things like, you know, like connecting this little street and connecting that little street. And when we kind of looked at it from what just happened with the hurricane, if you don't have a good electrical grid coming in, it doesn't matter how many little streets you connect, you're not, we've seen pockets that happen, right? And I think that's really important for us to identify, like, some of the major, biggest concerns that they can hit, and, you know, get the funding for those, make sure they're properly funded, and make sure that they are properly maintained. Because that's been the other thing the whole time. Like, I've talked to people, and especially with this storm, on Mount Edward Road, people were saying they couldn't bike in the bike lane because everybody put their trash in the bike lane. So things like that. So I think just kind of setting these priorities and working down the little things later, but looking at a big picture and saying, you know, what are the big things that we can get funding for, like those 3 areas. That's basically my concern. The plan over time, I think, will kind of fill in the gaps in between. But as far as getting that funding and funding it properly, because I think there's so many projects like this that people in the past have tried to throw some funding towards, but it really wasn't funded properly, or the ideas, you know, couldn't be completed properly without the funding. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
So you talked about safety and maintenance. So is there a way that could be incorporated into the letter, that a part of what we'd like to see? I think that safety is important to BFC as well. You know, we could just maybe spin it in a way that,
Is there a way to word the letter that shows support of this? Just thinking about what you said, would this possibly as a starting point to be developed or workshopped with an advisory group, or however that might be best worded, but to.
Oh, I think absolutely, yeah. I could certainly write that we endorse the idea of an integrated plan for for an integrated citywide network, recognizing that this is a draft plan, but also the need to prioritize things like user safety and so on, and admitting that this plan will need to evolve in response to community consultation and consultation with other interested parties. So I could certainly write that. I mean, maybe the thing, I think that the flip side, aside from our specific concerns, is that this is the only plan on the table right now, right? So it's sort of quite useful, I think, to bike-friendly communities to have a letter in their pocket to support that, recognizing that whatever happens in the end, whoever is the mayor in 5 years, 10 years, what'll happen in the end will look a bit different, quite a lot different from whatever the initial plan is.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Do we have to make a motion to do that?
If I could just have on record that people would support me doing this on condition that I send it around, I can have it sent around probably by the early weekend if
Yeah.
people are happy with that.
I'll second.
Okay. And I just wanted to mention one of my concerns. Last meeting, I spoke to it about with Mitch there. And like looking at this, even he said it, he's looking at it from a bike perspective. And like a lot of it is bike, but I don't know if if there needs to be a different kind of lens, like a accessibility lens added as well. Like, because yes, if it's incorporating all the bikes, but if it's traditionally an active transportation pathway, I think that lens needs to be looked at a little bit further so that when it gets made, that is done efficiently and we're not chasing ourselves for not doing it when. So that's my concern on it as well, I think.
Absolutely, Ryan. And I can, in my sort of comments, I can highlight safety, the need for regular
Yeah.
maintenance, and the consideration of accessibility.
And maybe all it needs is somebody to like review it and look at it with an accessible lens, and
Yeah.
like that's all my
No,
my concern.
very good point.
And I wanted to just add in that, Richard, when we say about maintenance, I think it's about asking for dedicated resources to maintain the AT lanes throughout the city of Charlottetown.
Absolutely.
We can put in as many lanes and trails and pathways and for whomever and whatever type of person and make it safe from 8 to 80. But if they are not treated, looked after, maintained, it becomes a bigger issue and the safety risk becomes more intense or higher for the users. So I really would like to see that that the city of Charlottetown is prepared to put dedicated resources to the maintenance and safety.
It's in my notes now. I just took notes, yeah. I will certainly add that.
That's awesome.
Could I ask a point of clarification? So that motion was to support the writing of a letter, and that letter would be in support of bike-friendly communities report? Is that correct?
Report in principle.
Report in principle. So, perfect. So I guess later down the road, should the report be finished in the draft form, there would be either a formal presentation to council through this advisory board or directly from bike-friendly communities. Is that kind of the longer?
In conjunction with Carrie, wouldn't it?
I suppose it depends on what this committee looks like after the election, doesn't it?
For sure. I just wanted to raise that just in case, like in terms of timing, I'm just wondering about, it could be until January until that comes forward, and just wanted everyone to be aware that there's that kind of period in between as well. It's just a consideration.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure bike-friendly communities will be very happy to collaborate, whatever that looks like, moving forward with this plan, yeah.
I would think that they should be on someone should be on the advisory committee.
We'll certainly, whatever it looks like, yeah, we'll definitely try to get someone on board from, yeah. So,
No, unfortunately, I didn't receive an email back.
I had an extended email exchange with Nancy McMinn. It was largely about fallout from the hurricane, literally all over the various trails. So the report is just generally that she's been overseeing the clearing of the trails, and the Confederation Trail within the city limits is now completely accessible again, but obviously they were hard at it in the wake of the hurricane. So that's the substantive element of the report.
No report.
Yeah, there's nothing with that. Nothing on that end other than the latest newsletter they put out, which is great as always. So you can check that out.
Bike-friendly community.
well, we've covered a lot. But I will add that with the election coming up, the municipal elections, we are developing a questionnaire to send to all candidates to ask them about their stance on active transportation and what they would do to, to further that within their communities. We plan to send it out to all the different municipalities that are having elections, and hope to get that out soon so that we can publish their answers on our website and social media, just for everyone's information and what their policies would be. If there's anything specific you'd like to see on that questionnaire, now's the time to tell me. If you have any thoughts, or you can send me an email. We hope to get them out by the end of the week to the candidates. So, yeah.
I'll have to think of something.
Feel free to send it my way.
Can you put a timeline on their responses so we actually get their replies in good time?
Yes, we will. We will make that request of them.
Can you ask them in, when you send out the survey, if they're prepared to support having an AT lens on any new or existing construction or refurbishing or anything like that? If they're willing to adapt best practices in terms of active transportation in cities?
AT lens on construction. Yes. I think I got it. Thank you.
I just think the support of having people in council that are willing to say yes to that, it just alleviates things like Ryan is saying, that afterwards, we then have to have, we don't have enough lighting, the sidewalk wasn't wide enough there, we didn't think about this user or that user. When the city's built for active transportation lanes, it's built for the people and the users and less about the cars. And so I think when we have construction or modifications or new suggested sidewalks or pathways, we want to think about it where I might not have to look at a map and say, well, that pathway is only 2 feet wide here, but over here it's 6 feet wide. So we want that to be really accurate and know that everyone's looking at it, that we're actually on the radar.
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely can ask that question. I'm very interested to see the responses we get.
Oh, maybe ask them if they're in favor of developing an integrated network plan for active transportation across the city.
Okay. Developing. Got it.
And any new business?
No new business, but I had a thought. I had some time to think when didn't have power, and it got me thinking about, like, we talk about active transportation and we talk about people walking and biking and cars and all of the different things that we have, and our towns and cities, just because of how things go, you horse and buggy that goes into a vehicle, and things have changed. And then we're in this world of technology now, and we talk about the environment, and we talk about, how do we divvy up all this space and make it usable for everybody. And a lot of talk comes up of autonomous vehicles, vehicles that can drive themselves. My personal opinion is that's just not possible. The reason for it, a lot of the testing that these big car companies do, that comes out of a place like California, where you don't have snow, you don't have blizzards, you don't have a lot of the things that we have here. They have big budgets for roads and better roads, that type of thing. And then I get to thinking about drones, and you see drones all the time, and you see, drones, people flying them, and how quickly they go, and the maneuverability, and the design of the four propellers, and and then you look at Dubai, who they've just put out new police vehicles and their motorcycles that are based on that same design of the drone, where their police officers now can drive basically a drone as a pursuit vehicle, and they can go up off the ground. So, we're kind of seeing that. And then you get to thinking, well, this is really the future. And the reason why autonomous vehicles don't work, because you have a lot of things in the way. And kind of in the same way that, like in the continent of Africa, they've skipped a lot of cost by using cell towers. They haven't had to run traditional landlines. And that enabled to propel them to the next level without the cost of the infrastructure. And if we look at some of the things now, so we talk about transportation lanes and we talk about vehicles, I believe in the future what will happen is that people will own vehicles that will fly. The drone model is really the next generation of that. And I don't think people will necessarily drive. If you wanted to go to the mall, you'd get in your drone and you hit your button and you say, Charlottetown Mall or Royalty Crossing. And it basically takes you, every vehicle will have a beacon, they understand they're going from point A to point B. The human doesn't fly it. That takes the pressure off the roads. Those roads then can become the places that we want them to be. They can become the active transportation lanes. Realistically, driving a car on the ground won't be a thing, because why would you? Why would you drive a car on the ground when you can fly from point A to point B? So I think we look at the things that we're looking at now based on how we've lived our lives and kind of where we've come from. And I think the technology, we're going to skip a lot of this infrastructure, the infrastructure being the roads and the autonomous vehicles and the tires on the ground, and skipping that with drone technology and how people will pilot things in the future. I think that's where we're going. And some of the stuff we're doing now, I hope we can look at it and say, we're not kind of stuck in how we're doing things, but how we could possibly do things in the future, because I think we have all kinds of opportunity to change the way we live for the better. And I think some of this technology can help us do it if people think about it kind of down the road and bigger than how we look at how we use vehicles and transportation now. Kind of. I mean, if it. I think it's soon. I think it's coming. But the idea of physical wheels on ground, I think that's the old landline. That's the analog telephone, and I think we'll break away from that, and it will be this kind of direct transportation and take the human factor out of it. The crashes, that type of thing. And when you're dealing with the air, I mean, you've got a straight, generally straight, point A to point B, but you've got depth of, height and down, so different levels. I mean, when you look at a lot of science fiction, when you see the future of flying vehicles, you have multi-level, vehicles. So I hope that it opens up some of those roads for, other things.
Can I just ask, I should probably ask Doug, what is the future of this committee? What happens to us? So we're formally disbanded now going into the election. And do we all have to be re-elected and reappointed, whoever is the new mayor? Or what formally is the process?
I asked about this today, as I expected it would come up. So it's, at the end of the day, it's up to council, really. And it's my first time going through it, so I've never witnessed it, but I've heard reports of how it has proceeded in the past with this most recent council. So November 7th is the election. There's a 2-week period called a determination date, and then a 2-week period after that. So I think it's the 21st of November. That's when nothing can be challenged anymore. The next council is determined. That date of determination date is there's no more committee meetings. You can have committee meetings like if essential urgent items comes up, but I don't think that would take place in the context of the task force. And that applies to council committees and council as a whole as well. So the next council would be sworn in on December 6th. Between that period and when council really starts to make decisions and to meet and move things and get a handle on what the next 4 years look like, there's meetings with department heads and city administration, with council to just determine what advisory boards will be reinstated, if there's new ones, if there's some that aren't needed anymore, for example. That's happened in the past. And then those committees meet and they determine, we're going to have an AT task force, we're going to have a food council, and they might add some, take some away. At that point, once those things are decided and it goes to council and it's made official, there's a public call for all the advisory boards, top to bottom, and it would be like the same thing that happened, I guess, in 2018, where it's open to all members of the public. So anyone on the committee now, there's a 2-year term limit, as far as I'm aware, for people on committees. It might be 2 periods of 2 years, actually. So it's after 2 years, you're supposed to reapply and everything. So at that point, there'll be an open call for committees. So anyone who hasn't done their full 4-year time is welcome to reapply. That might change, of course. It's up to council to determine if those term limits still apply. But that's the plan for now. So I think, just based on what I understand, I think the earliest that would be taking place would be January, but it could be February, just depending on priorities and everything. So keep an eye out for those public calls when they happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
And with that being said, I guess the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Ryan, and happy Christmas, everyone.
I wasn't ready for that either.
Oh, that's what's up.
Halloween.
And Ryan,